smashing your shin into banana trees, having coconuts dropped on your stomach. These are just a couple of the training methods we see Van Damme utilize in the movie Kickboxer to prepare for his fight at the end of the movie. Today I'm going to break down, are these training methods and other ones we see in the movie actually utilized by professional kickboxers like myself as we prepare for fights. So many of you recognize Kickboxer for Van Damme's dance scene in the bar. Many people have seen that. Many people will recognize it in the martial arts world because it's so fun. And people either sort of admire him for it or like to make fun of him. I'm not 100% sure. I feel like it's kind of split.
I made a funny.
But today we're looking at all the training scenes, and I'm going to tell you if there's any reality to the method of training, if there's little tweaks we can make to actually make them realistic. And the first thing that I want to say is, even though this movie is called Kickboxer and Van Damme's brother early in the movie is a kickboxer, this actually takes place in Thailand. That's where they say the characters go to and they do all their training. So it's kind of funny that it's called Kickboxer. So very early in the movie, we see Van Damme holding pads for his brother, who was an actual real kickboxer in real life, Dennis Alexio, and he's holding pads for him. And these are just Thai pads. This is something which pretty much MMA fighters, Muay Thai fighters, kickboxers, we all use this, and we all use it the way that they are in the movie. So they got that correct. The one thing which I don't like is the way Van Damme is holding the pads. It looks very beginner to me, and it's because his elbows are squeezed together. I've made a video on this already where I talked about the improper ways to hold Thai pads. You want to flare your elbows out slightly. You feel much stronger in this position, and you're able to absorb the impact of that kick, as opposed to here where you're just kind of absorbing only through the triceps. Those pads are gonna snap back and you're gonna get rattled more. If you're trying to learn how to hold these, don't hold like Van Damme, flare those elbows out. The next scene we are looking at is Van Damme running. He's just going for a little jog. Looks like something every fighter does. Pretty much every fighter goes for some sort of run, but then his trainer calls him over and gives him a piece of meat to put on his hip. And he said, this is gonna make you run faster. And Van Damme goes, how's that gonna happen? The dog starts chasing him and then he starts running faster. Yes, running is a method which pretty much all fighters use. If you don't like running, I have a video on other ways that you can get that cardio on point. But you're not gonna have a dog chasing you. There are fun ways to make fast running less of a grind and just something which is slightly more enjoyable. Maybe I'll do a video on that in the future. But yes, overall, running is a staple for cross training for pretty much all athletes in the fight world. The next scene we're looking at is Jean-Claude having a coconut dropped on his stomach by his trainer. Now, this has a little bit of Hollywood flair. You probably wouldn't use a coconut, but dropping medicine balls on somebody's stomach or throwing it into it, 100% we're gonna do that. And we might even have, us standing up and somebody banging punches into your body. I have used both of these methods before. Why do we do this when we're already doing sit-ups? Well, think of the same thing for your thigh. You can do loads and loads of squats, but then get kicked in the leg and just get a big Charlie horse. So you need to condition. You need to learn how to breathe out on impact, and sit-ups, while they help make the muscles stronger and maybe a little bigger, they're not gonna help you in that same way as absorbing the impact, so you have to do both. So dropping the coconut, sure, I can get behind it. Next up, we see Van Damme and his trainer at a ruin, an old temple, and the trainer has two sticks and he's sort of swinging them at him, making Van Damme work on his defense, make him throw some techniques back in between. I love this. Maybe not with a stick. Again, Hollywood theatrics, something a little softer like a pool noodle would be great, but we see fighters like Canelo do this all the time. Pool noodle training. I do it with people who come to do private lessons with me. It's a safe way to throw shots at somebody to get them very comfortable with not having fists flying at their head, but still getting the same reaction. So yes, I think this is a very good fight movie scene, and while it has that little Hollywood flair, it's still something which I would do as a pro fighter. Next up, we see Van Damme, for lack of a better word, doing bag work. he's not really hitting a bag. He's hitting a flat surface, which I guess the most similar thing to, which an actual fighter would hit, would be a wall-mounted bag, which you will see very often in Thailand. Now, it's great to have something to hit like this, but the way he's doing it is very incorrect. We already talked at the beginning of this episode how this is called Kickboxer, but it's really Muay Thai they're training for. But either way, the way Van Damme is throwing kicks is neither of these two sports. He looks like he's training for sport karate in this fashion, and you don't need targets here and here and here and here. You need them all centered because all your shots are coming to one person and people are about yay big. You don't need to go from here to there and chase them around. So while parts of this are good, parts of it are unrealistic, and it's something that I would just never do. Van Damme in a deep split. We pretty much see this in every single movie he is in. And overall, yes, you have to train your splits, but you don't need to be able to do a full split because that's actually kicking way above head level. I actually stopped training my split to the extent where I would spend 10, 15 minutes a day because I was just going, you know what, I can spend that time better utilizing some other sort of training, and I was able to kick way too high over head level. I would never use the pulley system that he's engaged in. That's not necessary, but there are metal split machines which have like a little device that you can spread the legs apart, force them apart. So while you won't see a lot of professional fighters utilize this type of stretching regime, it's still something which, yeah, could be used. All right, kicking a banana tree. I never saw this until about 10 years ago. Then I remember seeing a video of Buakaw kicking a tree, seeing it collapse, and all of a sudden it seemed like when anybody who had a decent skill level went to Thailand, they had to get a video of them smashing down that tree. This is not the way that you want to train your round kicks. It's not the way you want to condition your shins. If you did this, you put yourself through the agony of knocking down a tree when you have an unconditioned shin, yes, your shin will get stronger, but it's going to be mangled for weeks, and you're not going to be able to kick off that leg. You're not going to be able to train. Micro damage is okay, and you get that in the form of kicking a hard bag or kicking hard Thai pads. Smashing into a tree, it's something that people are using on their social media. It's something I would never do, and I would advise you guys not to do this as well. Next up, we see Van Damme back at that temple ruin, and he's working on his high kicks, snapping them way up. There's a target in the air. We would probably see him hitting something like a paddle or somebody holding a hand pad up there. But overall, yes, working on your high kicks is very good. And somebody just walking backwards going kick, kick, kick. This is something which I would utilize. I would not throw it the way he is, where I kick and I pull every time. I'd want to hit the target and blast through it. So I'm actually aiming at somebody's head and practicing knocking them out. But overall, not a bad training method. Once he takes the top off that little stick, then he starts doing his classic Van Damme split kicks, which are very cool to watch, but you're not going to see a professional fighter train these for two reasons. Number one, they take a whole lot of energy. Jumping and spinning and landing, it's so much more tiring than throwing a basic round kick. And number two, the probability of landing this technique is very low. As soon as you get fancy with techniques, it's very likely that you're going to miss your intended target, or your opponent sees it coming and just takes a step back. So you will never see me train this type of kick for a fight. Might do it for fun, but I'm not going to do it to actually land in a fight. Next up, we see Van Damme doing some sort of kata looking stuff, but then moving into something which looks like shadow boxing. So I'm going to say this is a shadow boxing regime that he's utilizing, but he's not really doing a good job because he's changing from sort of a Tai Chi karate style looking sport, then to Muay Thai, and then back again. You want to be sport specific. So while it looks really cool for the movie, that's not how we're going to do things. If I'm training for a fight, I'm going to keep it 100% sport specific. It's going to be MMA. It's going to be kickboxing, it's going to be Muay Thai. I'm going to throw my techniques, try and be seamless in the way I execute, and it's not going to be whoop, and then taking a pause, and then going into something karate style. Now there's this scene which always made me laugh, and I kind of liked, where his trainer talks about when somebody hits you, you breathe in, and then there's a moment to breathe out. And if you can do both At the same time, it's very good. And well, the words didn't really make sense the way he's explaining it. It is actually utilized. Breath training has a purpose to maximize your lung capacity. I already have a video which you can follow along with up there. And yes, overall, I do it. I did it today. I did some breath training work today when I finished my run. Now, we talked very quickly at the beginning about the dance scene with Van Damme. After that, he gets in a fight with a bunch of guys at the bar. When he comes out, he asks the trainer what was wrong with them, and the trainer says, I basically set you up to fight to see your skills. This is something which would never happen because we have sparring partners and it's safe and there's less risk of massive damage. This is the reason that we train in the gym. If you're somebody out there who thinks, I'm gonna test my skills this weekend and I'm gonna go to the bar and get in a fight to see how good my skills have progressed and how they compare to other people, that's not the way to go about it. So that scene there is entirely incorrect. You get a sparring partner, you put the gear on, you make sure that when you finish, you're both healthy. It doesn't need to be an all-out battle. You save the all-out battles for actual fights, and sparring is preparing for those fights. And the last scene that we are talking about today is Van Damme submerged underwater working on some sort of technique. Looks very karate-esque, but overall, underwater, does it serve a purpose? Yes, I believe it does. Number one, when you're under there, you're gonna have the limited oxygen. So again, you're gonna increase your threshold to work as you're breathing really hard and maybe not getting as much air as you want. And number two down there, there's gonna be that panic. Israel Adesanya in his recent training camp was actually doing training underwater. An additional reason for beginners that I like going under there is you can actually really work on perfect technique, especially for kicks. You can float them up. And if you're a higher level fighter, you can get under there and punch as fast as you can, but you're only gonna go about this fast because the water is a resistance. It's providing that resistance, which means if your normal punch is kind of like flick, flick, you're more like whoo, whoo. So it's actually good training the same way as if we were to grab a band and try and punch. So training underwater, would I make it the go-to method for shadow boxing? No. But does it have a place? Would I do it? Especially if I had a pool in my backyard, which I used to. Yes, I used to absolutely go underwater and hold my breath and shadow box. Partially for fun, but it still serves a purpose. And that is the episode on the training regime, the training style that Van Damme uses in the movie Kickboxer. As you saw, some of it is very applicable, some of it is absolute nonsense and just Hollywood theatrics. But overall, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some smiles out of it. I hope you're gonna go back and watch the movie again because it is just fun to watch. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like. Get subscribed if you have not already. Train hard, guys. I will see you back here soon for another episode.